Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our latest webinar, The Future of Work with Microsoft Copilot. My name is Gareth Boyle, the Marketing Manager for Microsoft here at Fusion 5. And before I hand over to our first speaker, just a couple of quick bits of housekeeping. Our presenter will be up first covering content, and we will conclude with a brief Q&A at the end of the session. If you do have any questions during the presentation, you can ask them via the top right-hand corner of your browser or Teams application, and we'll address it at the end. I'll also share a copy of the recording after the session has concluded as well. With that out of the way, let's kick things off with our speaker, Senior Microsoft Solutions Strategist, Troy Gerber. Troy.
Good afternoon, everybody, from a wonderfully warm and sunny Auckland. Great to have you all on the call today. So our topic for today, the future of work with Microsoft Copilot. So sort of a bit of a glimpse into what's coming up in our future, and we'll talk about why we're saying our future instead of just jumping into it. So from a role perspective, I work for the Microsoft practice at Fusion 5 as a strategist, and I'm also the head of the Azure and Copilot COE for Fusion 5 all up across ANZ. So what is a Microsoft Copilot? I'm sure we've all heard the word, which is why on the webinar. It's effectively a digital companion for your whole life. The word Copilot is not sort of just something that was just put out there. It's very intentional. A Copilot is something that sits alongside a pilot and assists them with what they're doing, doing actions, getting information, getting data, and feeding it to the pilot so the pilot can decide what to do next. And that is what Microsoft Copilot is in our life as well. So if you look at Copilot for areas way, it's an AI assistant that lives in your applications, and that's a really, really key distinction. Every single application, and we'll touch on a few of them in a slide or two, has a Copilot or will have a Copilot. And reason why per application is important is because it's context driven. So the context here is I need a Copilot in the context of where I'm working or the task I'm doing. So if I'm inside Excel, I need a Copilot that can understand data. If I'm inside Word, I need a Copilot that can understand context of formatting and working with text. So the Copilots that we have from Microsoft perspective are very context driven to where they are and what you're doing. There are a lot of Copilots, 160 plus actually, and a lot more coming down the line as well. So majority of the Microsoft applications you're familiar with or might be working with either will have a Copilot already or will have Copilots coming out very soon across the whole stack. There are effectively two types of Copilots, and we're being a bit generalistic now, but out of the box. So Copilots that ship with the product that you've bought or that you subscribe to, such as Copilot for Microsoft 365, Copilot for Dynamic Sales, or Copilot for GitHub. And there's also an option to go fully tailored where you start from the bottom up and actually build a Copilot that's very specific to your needs. And we'll spend a bit of time and we'll demo one or two scenarios on how we can actually build our own Copilots in the ecosystem. As mentioned before, no matter where you're going to be, you're going to have a Copilot. Context-based, once again, is application-based, but it's also role-based. So the Copilots, when they deliver themselves to you, are looking at the intent of the person that's using the Copilot, not just the application that's in. And you'll see a little bit of a demo I'll run through a little bit later when we look at Dynamics Field Service and the context of how the Copilot across 3 different screens does something differently depending on who the user of the application is and what context they're viewing it in. There are a lot of Copilots out there already in the Microsoft Power Platform space. We've got a whole bunch of Copilots for Power Automate, Power Pages, Power Virtual Agent, which has actually been rebranded. We'll talk about that very soon. Even in the Microsoft desktop space, M365 on the Microsoft desktop side, there's a lot of Copilots around on all the products we use for productivity. We'll talk about availability of those towards the end of the session. And then the dynamic space, there are a whole bunch of Copilots that have landed already and ones that are planned. And then there's some Copilots that don't fit into what we would typically see as our business applications for productivity space, but are more functional. So there's a Copilot for GitHub for writing code, security Copilot for looking at your security posture across your tenant, and Windows 11 has a Copilot. So you can, if you have Windows 11 and if you've accepted the latest update, you'll have a Copilot button in Windows 11 to help you work with your Windows environment and also give you answers to questions along the way. So how does it help me? Let's have a bit of a deep dive into a few videos on demos on how the different co-pilots work in the different systems and what you can do with them. We don't have a live environment for Dynamics 365 or for M365, so we're going to be using videos and screenshots provided by Microsoft and just talk through some of the capabilities in the context. So how is it going to help you? What typically happens when we're working without an AI assistant, so let's say the way we used to work, we would always deliver what we needed to, but we'd have quite a lengthy start. So if I'm trying to draft an email, I need to sort of think of the context of the email, make sure the grammar is correct, that the flow of the email is right, tone is correct, and the information is accurate as well. You're thinking about drafting a document, and a good example in our world at Fusion 5 is we do a lot of RFP responses or proposals. We need to make sure that proposal has all the information in it. So there's typically quite a bit of legwork getting a good response out before we could actually have a draft that we can distribute. The idea behind AI and Copilot in this specific case is that it gives us the draft to start with. So we don't start with doing the legwork of trying to find the information or format a first version. The Copilot does that for us. And what that enables us, is to save a lot of time. So we actually get time back to do the work we want to do or are there to do. And also definitely helps with promoting a better version of what we're trying to do, because the time spent now can be focused more on quality versus quantity or just getting some content out. So that's one of the major benefits of working with AI in the workspace and specifically Microsoft Copilot. So what does a Copilot do? Here's a couple of examples. I'll step through them, and we do have a video of one or two as well that'll just talk you through how that interacts. So the first one I want to highlight, and this is something that I'm sure everybody on this webinar has been through, where you get a meeting request. So it's dropped into Outlook. So I'm in the context of a person viewing my mail and viewing my meeting request. Meeting request comes up and I can't attend the meeting, but it's a meeting that I'm actually quite keen to understand what happens. So in this case, Copilot pops up and says, you know what, I'm going to give you an option to follow this meeting because you have a conflict. So it's picked that up already and has added a follow button. What that will happen is the Copilot will actually attend the meeting on my behalf as a virtual attendee and then provide a summary of what happened. So I'm able to go to the meeting afterwards, get the meeting notes generated by the Copilot, see the content that was presented, and also start asking the Copilot different things like, where are my action items? So this is once again context driven. The Copilot knows it's inside a meeting, it has access to the meeting transcript, and is giving me the option to actually add more functionality and say, well, I've got the meeting notes, but what did they talk about and what am I supposed to do? Please go and identify tasks. So this is where the Copilot becomes your virtual meeting assistant in the context of Outlook, and in this case, specifically in the context of meetings. Another Copilot that's in generally available is Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. This Copilot sits in Teams as a virtual assistant inside of Teams. And instead of having context of one application, it has context of data. So in the example you have on screen here, somebody has asked a question of the Copilot, and what it's done is it's gone through all the different data sources that it knows I have access to from a permissions point of view. So things like SharePoint, Dynamics, my email, calendars, anything that I would normally access through maybe a user interface or by doing a search on top of SharePoint. It uses that as a basis, and when I ask a question, it goes and tries to find the best answer. Think about when you're doing a search in Google, but this time with a lot of intelligence, is able to draft those answers, bring it back, and very importantly, reference the sources where it found the answers from as well. In the AI world, we call that grounding. So that means I've grounded my answer in actual data that you can show. When I do the slide, I do sometimes get a question around security. Can it find other people's stuff? Only if you could find it through a normal search. So all your security principles, all those concepts kick in and they remain constant. You aren't suddenly going to find your boss's payslip unless he wants you to. Let's have a look at another Copilot. In Excel, the Copilot is very specific. So this Copilot changes context now. It's not really there to answer questions and draft copy. It's there to analyze data. So the Copilot inside of Excel is trained against looking at data sets and providing information. In this example, I'll be asking a question, and it's gone off screen, so apologies for that. We're saying, give me a sales forecast for the next 3 quarters. And what it does then is it goes and starts generating the answer, and I can insert that straight into the sheet. So I'm going to let that run again, and we just ask the question again, and then we'll do a pause. So it says working on it, and let's do a pause right there. And then 2 things happened. One is it tells me there's some Python code, because we can inject Python into Excel, topic for another day. But it also starts giving me actions and says, hey, I think there might be something you want to do, because I've got the data for you. I've done analysis. Do you potentially want to drop this into your sheet, which is a very logical next step? Or I can copy the data through the little copy icon. So the Copilot not only goes and gets the data I need, but starts giving me actions back. You'll notice it doesn't automatically do it. It gives me the options, like a good Copilot saying, hey, Pilot, I found the information you need. There it is. What would you like to do next? And once I've chosen what I want to do next, it can action it and put it straight into Excel, and I can move forward and carry on doing my job. Copilot in Word is one of my favorites, and I'll let this run twice. So here I'm able to start a Word document and say, draft a proposal for something based off notes and a roadmap that I have. I'll let this run 2 or 3 times so you can view it. So what this is doing is it's looking at the same way when you open up an email and want to add an attachment. Outlook says, hey, I noticed you used these documents recently or spoke to these people recently. Are these the ones you want to attach? Because I'm assuming you're trying to send something that you recently used. And this does the exact same thing. So it allows me to point at data and say, base your answer off this information that I've already created and have access to. And it drops a first draft into my Word so I can work with that. Not only can you do first drafts, but if you have data inside of Word already, one of the things that is quite time consuming is you create the Word document, and a lot of us to create a first draft, and we put as much into it, and then we go and start a review. So start heavy and get the stuff out later. I can still access Copilot. Copilot will be available. In this case, I found a paragraph. The paragraph reads well, but I realized it's not really going to be something that I would want to have as text. It'll look much better in a table. So I can just go and ask Copilot to visualize as a table. It'll read through the data and go and create it for me. I can choose to keep that, or I can give it further instructions. In this case, I'm asking it to go and join some columns, and it brings the columns into space. And now once my Copilot has done its job, it's gone and helped me do something very quickly that typically would have taken me a long time to do. And most importantly, it's kept the context of my font, it's kept the context of the language, and I haven't had to change anything. How often do we have to go through Word documents and change all those H1 tags or H2 tags or body tags to make sure the document's consistent? That's all taken care of by the Copilot, but still with the option for you to insert and decide what to do next. So those Copilots were great examples of Copilots in the Microsoft productivity space, so the stuff that we work with every single day as office workers. What about the business application side? Once again, we mentioned that Copilot is very context-driven about what you're going to do. I'm going to play a very short video, and then we're going to sort of walk through that video so you can get a sense of how in the future of Dynamics and the business applications world, a Copilot will assist you. So let's run that one.
Introducing Copilot in Dynamics 365 Field Service, helping your front line deliver exceptional service. With Copilot, your customer escalations are pre-populated into draft work orders for frontline managers to review in Outlook. And with recommendations based on travel time, availability, skill set, and more, your technician scheduling becomes streamlined.
So that was a very quick video. So let's break that down a bit. So this is something called Copilot for Field Service as part of the Dynamics Business Application Suite. And Field Service typically deals with fault management. So customer calls in, sends an email in, and something needs to be done. I need to dispatch somebody out to go and do work. And it could be at a plant, it could be at a customer site. So that's the concept, or what we're trying to do. But we're using multiple applications. And in this scenario, the first thing that's happening is that we're using Outlook. And the request has come through from an email from the customer. The Copilot for Dynamics Field Service is not something you install into Outlook. You enable it. It's just there. It's not an add-on. It's part of the experience. And it's able to immediately detect if the email is from a customer that sits inside of our customer base. And the Copilot then starts suggesting things that I could do, create a work order from the email, generate a reply, or schedule work order. So it's already starting to pick up the email context and what the function is, why that email came through. In this case, it gives me a bit of an indicator, so it drops the field service logo into the email, so it knows, so I know that it's a field service contact request. So there's a visual indicator. Copilot then reads through the email and starts generating input. A work order template is then made available through the Copilot sidebar, and it will go and start populating that work order based off the content in the email. So it looks at words like, I need it fixed today, and realizes this is urgent. It looks at the company, works out the service account, looks at the description and figures out this is an HVAC repair. And really cool here, it actually does something where it summarizes the content of the email. So many times when we receive a complaint email or service request email, it's just somebody typing email. They might be angry, they might be happy, we don't know. And you don't want to give your technician a lot of stuff to go through. So in this case, it summarizes with the customer name, company name, what the problem is and what has to be serviced. So when that work order is pushed through to the service agent or the field service agent, they don't have to trawl through the records. The field service agent themselves, when they open up the field service app, either the standard one or a customized one, they'll have access to the field service app Copilot, which allows them to do things like generate a summary of the work order. Once again, instead of going through a screen with a whole bunch of different fields, they can say, hey, Copilot, tell me what this is about. It does a nice summarization, mentions the customer details, what the problem is, and links through to the field service request. So the context is natural language instead of system generated, which is a really, really cool thing and makes it a lot easier for field service agents to actually work with the content. Copilot also recognizes once it's scheduled that work order that the next stage is I need to go and get somebody to do the work, and I need the right service agent to do that. And this is where AI power scheduling kicks in. It looks at the context of the service request, where the service request is, what type of skills are needed, and then looks at the availability of service agents in the region based on distance and capability and availability of when they'll be ready. And will then provide us with a list of service agents and ask us to choose the one with the highest ranking. In this case, it's chosen David. David gets allocated the service request, and it's left off. So we have one concept, which is the field service request come in through Outlook as well as the app, not only identifying the request and populating the service request automatically from the contents, but also helping with the scheduling, something that we would typically have to do manually. So very, very high impact when it comes to what it can do for us and how much time it can save. So our future of our work will be to use Copilots to make sure it works. So a couple of questions, and I'll go through them and play a very short video afterwards. Is my data safe? Absolutely. Copilots use something called a generative AI. If you've heard of ChatGPT, that's generative AI. But it doesn't leave your environment. So everything that it does sits inside of Azure. So Microsoft Azure, in the case of the demos you'll see later, that's all in the Australian data center. So data sovereignty is sorted. That is enabled inside your Office 365 tenant in the context of your security and everything that is related to you. At no time does the AI go outside of that boundary. We don't throw something out at a different AI and say, tell us about it. We don't ask ChatGPT. We don't retrain on the data. So whenever the Copilot is running, it never looks at the data and tries to retrain itself to help other AI Copilots in different tenants. Everything is isolated to where you are. How does it know what to do? It knows what to do because it knows who you are. The same way when you open up Outlook, it goes to your mailbox and not somebody else's, based off your logon, based on your credentials, based on what you have access to via your normal security and access control. That's how it knows what to do, and it has the context of what you want to do. And is my data being trained? No. Does this color jumper work for me? I think it works for you. I think it does quite well. So let's have a quick run through of a very quick video of something called the Copilot system. The Copilot system is the underlying technology of how the Copilots work as their foundational layer. I'll play that video. It's about a minute long, and then we'll jump into some cool stuff.
Microsoft 365 Copilot is powered by what we call the Copilot system, a sophisticated processing and orchestration engine. It harnesses the power of 3 foundational technologies: the Microsoft 365 apps, that's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, and more. The Microsoft Graph, that's all your content and context, your emails, files, meetings, chats, and calendar. And a large language model, or LLM, a creative engine capable of parsing and producing human-readable text, all accessible through natural language. It starts with a prompt from you in an app. Copilot pre-processes the prompt through an approach called grounding. Put simply, grounding improves the quality of the prompt, so you get answers that are relevant and actionable. One of the most important parts of grounding is making a call to the Microsoft Graph to retrieve your business content and context. Copilot combines this user data from the graph with other inputs to improve the prompt. It then sends that modified prompt to the LLM. You may be familiar with what an LLM can do based on your experience with ChatGPT or Bing Chat. Copilot takes the response from the LLM and post-processes it. This post-processing includes additional grounding calls to the graph, responsible AI checks, security, compliance, and privacy reviews, and command generation. Finally, Copilot sends a response to the user and commands back to the apps. Copilot iteratively processes and orchestrates these sophisticated services to produce a result that feels like magic.
So incredibly informative video, that one, and it really just emphasizes one thing: security is key. Responsible AI is key. Making sure information provided to the language model to process has only the information it needs, not all the data in our systems. And as you heard, once it comes back, there's additional checks to make sure that you can't ask weird questions, or make sure that any data coming back definitely has been sanitized. So the type of things that Copilot does in its post-processing is making sure there's no personal information, no PPI information, making sure that any security or tagging levels that you have inside of your tenant are respected, any labeling is respected, any data loss protection is protected, and the answer given back to the person only has what they would normally see if they went to the data and access it in a natural way. So really, really cool, a great system, and it's the grounded system for all the Copilots, that's responsible AI. So what happens if I want to go and build my own? Can I build my own Copilots? Can I edit Copilots? And the answer is yes, you can. And there are 2 products that basically do that. One, the product called Microsoft Copilot Studio was launched about 2 weeks ago. It was announced at the Ignite conference. And it's a bit of a rebrand of something called Power Virtual Agent, but with a lot of additional capability. So it's a way where you can use Copilot Studio to either enhance existing Copilots or build your own. And for people that like to dabble right in the grassroots level, we have something called Azure AI Studio, where you can have access to the models and actually build your own Copilots with your own instructions and data. And I'll do a very basic demonstration of that. Works in about 5 or 6 minutes. So let's have a look at Copilot Studio and understand how that works. So one, I can build my own Copilots. So what does that mean? I might have a system of record. So in Copilot in Word, that's awesome. But what if I have data outside, or maybe there's data inside of a Google Store, or Amazon Web Service bucket, or maybe I've got data in an ERP system that's not part of the Microsoft ecosystem like Salesforce. I can then go and take the building blocks of Copilot, so the way we answer questions with natural language, connect that to that source system, and then have that Copilot deployed into my M365 environment. So when I ask questions inside of Microsoft Chat, inside of Teams or Copilot Chat, it'll know the context of the question and actually use that Copilot to answer. I can also extend my existing Copilot. So if I have Copilot in a specific application, and let's do a very basic one, you're going to say Copilot for Word. I want to be able to not only use the data that the graph can attach to, but I'm also, keep using with the Salesforce example. I might want to be able to, when I'm working with a Copilot for Word, say, please insert our latest sales figures for Q3. And that information is sitting inside of my Salesforce database. So that Copilot can be extended, Word Copilot can be extended to include that as a data source where it can get data from and provide information. So yes, build your own, extend what's there. Copilot Studio or Microsoft Copilot Studio will be available as part of the Microsoft 365 Copilot licensing. Additional licensing and how it will work will be announced around about the first quarter of next year. There will be a specific SKU for Microsoft Copilot if you don't have the M365 Copilot. If you have any questions around licensing, it can sometimes be a bit of a dark art. Let us know in the chat and we'll either address it on the call or get back to you afterwards. Something that's very important from our perspective is that this is a connected platform. And that's one of the messages that we've been getting from Microsoft for the last couple of years with the push out of things like the Power Platform is everything in the stack is connected. So we have access when it comes to Copilot Studio to integrate into technologies such as Azure AI Studio. So if I've built my own Copilot in Azure AI Studio, I can bring it across. We have access to the Azure bot framework. So if we want to make that Copilot to extend it beyond just low code, we can do that. And we have access to all the Power Platform AI models and connectors. And that is quite an important one. There are over 1,100 connectors inside of the Power Platform. I think about close to 1,200 actually. I have access to all those connectors, so I can build my Copilot and point it at any connector that's available to retrieve data. So this Copilot is not just your Microsoft information. It can be stuff that sits out of the ecosystem, but still within the context of your grounding and permissions that you have for those. The Copilot is going to be a conversational Copilot. So the Copilots typically are there to have a conversation with you. It's like having a conversation with the Copilot sitting next to you. So we'll have the Copilot system available as to be able to extend and customize. It'll have access to everything in the ecosystem we have, and just to sort of reinforce the message, we can either create our own Copilots, enhance Copilots we have, or build custom Copilots using the customs environment. We'll have a bit of a demo of how that works. We'll do an example of that in the next, in about 5 minutes. Let's touch on the last topic before we move away from slides and actually do some practical stuff. So can I build my own Copilot from scratch? Absolutely, and that uses Azure AI Studio. Azure AI Studio was also announced 2 weeks ago at Ignite, and this is basically all the Azure AI capabilities that existed already and a few additional ones in one place. So I don't have to go into different parts of Azure itself to go and find a speech module or a vision module or the open AI models. Everything's in one place, including the open source models. So if you are a developer who builds or work with language models or AI models, things like Hugging Face and Llama 2 will be there as well. So you aren't limited only to the open AI models. So a great place if you're a dev to actually go and jump in and start building. It's a single space. You're able to do your full testing. There's something called a playground, which we'll have a look at the moment. So you can test your models out and see how they'll work before you deploy them, and you have a couple of deployment options. So that said, let's end that slide and go over to one or two little demos. And I'll provide some context of the demos as we go along. So the first one I want to show you is Copilot Studio. It's new to everybody, launched like I said 2 weeks ago. A nice new interface. I'm doing a refresh to make sure we have a nice clear version of it. And the idea of AI Studio is that I can go and build my Copilots. A couple of really cool things to look at. let me set up generative AI so I can connect my Copilot to the generative AI space. So I can tell it I want you to use language models. And you'll see over there we have extend your Copilot with, he says, and in there, with conversational plugins. And these plugins are the plugins that we plug into other systems of record. We could also use plugins, this is really cool, from other vendors that follow the same format. So if somebody's created a plugin in OpenAI, so the guys that created ChatGPT, which they create plugins as well, we use the same industry standard. So we're able to consume plugins outside as well. So maybe somebody's built a plugin for a service that we need, and instead of rebuilding it, we can actually go and use one of those plugins as well. So it's not just what's in the studio. Also, a very, very quick example of something that is really cool with generative AI and the Copilot is not only can we ask questions and get answers back, but we can also build that actionable part. So the pilot gets some information from the Copilot saying, yep, the flaps need to go up 5%, and he goes, okay, Copilot, flaps up 5%, and he does something. So can we do that in the Copilot? Yes, we can, absolutely. And I'll quickly show you how we do that as a very, very quick demo. So I'm going into something called topics. Those of you who are familiar with conversational bots, this might look a bit familiar. When you're building a sort of generative AI or conversational bot, you need to give a topic so it knows what you're talking about. And we're going to have a topic there called Update Planner. And what I've done here is I've got a very simple trigger phrase, and I've told my conversational AI that if anybody uses any of these phrases, create a task, that I wanted to go and create a task in Microsoft Planner. So let's actually bring up that planner board. Whoops. And we'll have a look at that so we can see it running in real time. So I've got a planner board set up for this demo, and we'll see, can we actually, without having to do anything, so my planner board currently should have 2 very simple slides in them. It would be cool if I can just talk to this Copilot and have it log a request for me. So we're going to go and see how difficult it is that to do. So we're going to go add, call action, and I'll have a look here, and you'll see there is a plugins, and there's a task for create plugin, create a new task in Planner. This is the easy part. I click on it, it says, hey, I've got you, I'm connected to Planner. In the backend, for transparency, when I created the Planner plugin, I did tell it which Planner to use. So there was a little bit of a config, but all no code, I just needed the IDs. It tells me this is the different fields it's going to work in Planner. Typically, we would spend time putting a whole bunch of questions and answers here, asking, what do you want to do? What time do you do it? What do you want to sign to? So we build up a question. But because we're using generative AI that is able to read and give context back, we don't need to do that. So we're going to save this, and we're going to then pretend that we are new to everything. And we're going to go to our test bot option. Oops, sorry, my bad. Go up to test bot. And let's run. So now, instead of going, now I'm just going to ask it a question. I'm going to go, please create a task. And what it's doing is it's hitting that plugin and saying, sure, I can create a task for you, but I need to know a few things. So one of the things I need to know is who's the task going to be assigned to. I've got a bit of a cut and paste to make sure I don't spell this incorrectly. So I'm going to assign that task to one of my colleagues, Diego, and I'm going to use his email address in this context. It's coming back and says, sure, that's no problem. What is the title of the task? Make me a pizza. I haven't had lunch yet, so this is playing my mind. Hit the submit button and give it a second or two. And what's going to happen is it's going to basically connect to that plugin, and new task has been created. If I go back to my task flow and I click, you'll see there is make a pizza assigned to Diego. So why is that amazing? Well, I didn't have to define the questions. So it uses something called generative questions, where it looks at the plugin. So it looks at the source. So this could be Salesforce, could be Dynamics, could be any source system you have. derives the questions, looks at what it needs to know to be able to do the next thing, and then asks me the questions and sends it through. And once I've got that up and running, this is a very simple example. Obviously, it would be inside of Flow. I can then go and publish that out. And one of the options I have when I publish it is to publish to one of my existing Copilots, and that will then be available. So really, really cool example of how we can use the Copilot playground, not only to build Copilots that can answer questions, but it can also action as well. What if I want to do something that is completely new? I have an idea, but there is no Copilot, and I want to build something. So this scenario, I've opened up Azure AI Studio, and I'm inside of what's called a chat playground. It's an area where you can basically test your ideas and test your Copilot and see what it can do. And it's basically ChatGPT sitting inside of Azure. So if I go and ask it a question, I can say hi, and it's going to come back and it's going to answer. How can I assist you today? So I've actually got a question for it. The question is going to be HR related. So I'm going to go and copy that over there. And the question is, I'm going to tell it that I'm pregnant and I need information on leave policies that I can take. This is calling the normal ChatGPT model, which is available inside of Azure. And it's going to try its very best to answer the question. And it's going to do a reasonably good job. It's going to say, congratulations on the pregnancy, that's awesome. And it starts answering questions and says, you can take maternity leave, paternal leave. But you'll notice that the answers are grounded in information from America. I'm in New Zealand or Australia. That's not really something I care about. This is good context. But it's not data that is reflective of where I live and grounded information that is relevant to me. So I want to do a little bit more of that. So this is where I'm able to go and make sure I can do more with my Copilot. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give this Copilot a bit of a personality. And I'm going to copy that over there and tell you what that is in a second. We're going to give it instructions. That's something called a system message, where we're going to tell our Copilot what its purpose is, because Copilots have context and purpose. That is very, very important for us to make sure our Copilot knows that it's the Fusion 5 HR assistant. Its purpose is to answer questions. It's very clear and it's polite. So that is its personality. And I'm going to go and save that to make sure it's there. And then we're going to clear the chat and we're going to ask it the exact same question again. I'm pregnant, I'm going to take a leave. And this time it's going to be slightly different. It now has a system message that's told it what to do. So it says, congratulations, maternity leave. It's now once again going through. So it's been very supportive. It mentions Fusion 5, which is great. And it starts running through content. But it's making stuff up because it's still using information inside of ChatGPT's training. It doesn't really understand the context and is not grounding it information that is relevant to me. And I can see that because at no stage is it giving me any references. So this Copilot is working well, but it's still not giving me true information that I want. So this is the last cool part, is I'm now going to go add my own data. I'm going to add my own context. What we've done for this demo to make it quite easy, we've taken our, there are a couple of dummy policies. So from privacy point of view, and we've added these policies to a blob store in Azure. So basically a big folder in Azure. And I am now going to tell this Copilot that it has to go and use Azure search to get information. I'm going to tell it where the search engine is. So I've got one called Policy Index. I need to acknowledge that it's going to cost me money. That's all good. There's a couple of field mapping stuff. We can leave the generic ones in place. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now. There's a couple of steps, and I'm going to use keyword search. There are a different couple of keyword search options. We'll use the basic, which is keyword search, which is something you have inside of SharePoint. And I'm going to save and close. So now what I've done is I've given my Copilot its purpose, and I've told it where to get its data from, and I've told it must only limit responses to data that it finds and nothing else. And I've also told it how strict to be. So don't make up things, only give me proper answers. Let's quickly shift out of that and ask the exact same question again. And if the demo guards are with us, we should get a response which makes a lot more sense. We do typically sacrifice a small chicken to the demo gods, typically in the form of a KFC bucket, and this seems to have worked. So I'm getting a couple of answers, and it's really well. You go, like, this looks very similar, but now I start to reference New Zealand and Australia, which is awesome. And you'll see there's a little one over there. So not only is it generating content, but it's also telling me that it's getting it from reputable sources. So it's grounding itself in the data that I pointed it at, and is saying, fine, these are the references that I got this from. I got this from your flexible work arrangement, your training and development, and domestic leave policies. And if I click on one of those, it'll actually show me the citation. So my data is now completely grounded. Let's ask it one last question and be a bit more specific. When you're working with Copilot, one of the key things is to always make sure that you give it as much detail so it knows the context of what you want. And we'll run that last one and we'll leave it at that. So what this is doing now is I've given it a bit more detail. I told her I only want information about leave for pregnancy. I don't care about other leave types. And that my husband, I don't know what leave is applicable for my husband as well. So it's gotten fine-tuned its answer. Says I'm for employees expecting babies. This is what you're going to do, and it goes through the options for New Zealand. We're an ANZ company, so we cross both sides of Tasman. Tells me what my leave options are as well as my husband's leave options, and you'll see once it's finished rendering, if I click on the references, it is referenced paternity leave only. It's gone, not the other policies. So this is starting your own Copilot. It's still grounded in our data with our context, and once we have it here, we're able to either deploy it to a web application, we're able to deploy it to Power Virtual Agents or Copilot Studios is called now. So I could take this model and say, open up in Copilot Studio so I can add it as my Copilots. And if you're a developer, that's not a problem as well. You also have access to the code and the endpoints. You can give it your developers and say, there's the endpoint, there's security. Off you go and embed that into our application that we want to do. Fantastic. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go through one last demo and then we'll leave it as is. So this is a slightly different demo, and it's one of the things I mentioned earlier was that Copilot works very well with the underlying sources that we have inside of our Microsoft ecosystem, and the Power Platform is one of them. This is a very basic Power App. It's a one-page Power App. The data in here is living inside of Dynamics. So there's a Dynamics table and a service records for a vehicle. Very normal. If I click through the details, this is what we typically get in the app experience. I've only got maybe 15, 20 records in here. But typically the records we have can be quite lengthy, typically in the hundreds. I have an option, and I have a little Copilot button where I can embed a Copilot in Power Apps into my Canvas app. So I can actually have a Copilot add-on, and I can link that Copilot to the data so that I can ask natural language questions against the data in my Power App using Copilot for Power Apps. So I've got a couple of canned questions here just to make it easier because my typing is terrible. And we're going to ask this Copilot a few questions. So the first thing I'm going to ask it is, how many vehicles are serviced in 2023? Once again, we pray to the demo gods that everything has worked well. And it's now going through the data source. It's actually using dynamic search to create an index, so it is able to get that, and it pops up and says, there we go, there were 10 vehicles serviced in 2023. So that is something, if I want to do that, I might do a count, but if you're in the hundreds of records, it's slightly different. But that's awesome. That's quite an easy one. Let's do a bit more complex. I have a very specific vehicle, MSG 145, so Rego. It appears a few times. I want to know when last that was serviced, how many times you serviced that. So now I'm giving it a bit more of a complex question, but still natural language. I'm just asking it a question and I'm getting a very good answer. So MSG 145 was serviced 2 times. Twice might be better grammatically. So it's gone through my data. I didn't have to draw through, but I want to know what was done because it's not just counting. I want to understand, can you actually read and give me an answer? So my last question I'm going to ask it is, give me a total summary of services. I'm going to use a different vehicle so we aren't pre-cooking everything. And say, give me a detailed summary of PLA 194's last 2 services. Hit Copilot. So Copilot now is going to run through those dynamics tables, records, find information, and then create a natural language summary based on the answer I asked for. So in this case, I'm not sure why I'm getting such a horrible experience with this Zoom. So I will try and zoom out. Last 2 services were as follows: the date, what was done, so all the details that technician wrote in, the cost of the service, $70 of cheap service, second service. So the Copilot now, against this data, has been able to provide me a natural language answer in the context of data. So if you take this as a principle, anytime you build a Canvas app where it is data rich and you want to be able to just interrogate that data without having to have lots of filters and search boxes, you could just pop in a Copilot, put it out, ask it a question, and coming soon will be in the future, we'll also have voice option, and it'll go through the data and give you the response back. So that sort of covers what I wanted to do from a demo point of view. And we're going to say thank you on this one. I'm going to stop presenting and we're going to move back straight into the demo web session and check if there's any Q&As. I don't think there are any.
I think you have covered it all, Troy. So
yeah,
nice
yeah.
one.
So I have one last thing to cover, G, and I'm done.
Go.
Cool. So this session is called The Future of Work with Microsoft Copilot. And why do we say future work? Because Copilot's here. Well, very simple. There are Copilots available at the moment. A lot of them in the Dynamics Power Platform. GitHub Copilot as the OG has been around for over a year. The other Copilots, like Microsoft 365 Copilot, is generally available, but only to enterprise customers. And it's something you have to have on and go through your Microsoft Rep to get it. So those are very specific. We're looking at those being available to, let's say, the general licensed population next year. So some of these are coming. To prep, we get a question quite often is, how do I prepare for Copilot? Well, the switching it on part is going to be easy, but any answer that you ask any system, even if it's normal search, is always going to be, the answer is always going to be based on what's available. And if that data that's inside there is not good, you're not going to get the best answer. So our recommendation would be to start looking at getting your environments ready for Copilot. Make sure your data is nice and clean. I'm going to do the sales pitch here. We have a wonderful Copilot assessment available on AppSource. Go have a look at that, where we actually have our data analytics team come in and work with you to look at your data, look at your security profile, look at your data inside of things like SharePoint, and actually work with you. There are a couple of questions. If you don't mind, I'll work through them. I work with Methods Church, and we have an annual conference. We produce last videos. We want to do complex searches. I'm assuming you create a Copilot for that. Absolutely. You can 100% a Copilot. We're actually running we built a custom Copilot at Fusion 5, which we use internally. We've been working with Copilots, the ecosystem, luckily as Preview and as a Microsoft partner for quite a few, almost a year now. We have a Copilot that is able to look at our RFP responses and generate content. So we can ask it questions against RFPs that we have, and is able to go and get those answers from grounded data, and this inside of PDFs, and they're quite large, and bring those answers back to us. So yes, very possible. It's already been done. Gareth, did I miss any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple here. So we've got a couple saying thanks here, Troy. And
absolute pleasure.
And great session. What's your favorite Copilot feature coming from Stacey?
Oh, I can tell you what my favorite Copilot feature is now. That's Copilot for Power Automate. It is a mind-blowing completely. The fact that I can go into Power Automate and through natural language have it build the workflow for me. And it's actually helped me in my workflow, because I made assumptions around certain ways that my workflow to run. And because the Copilot is grounded in such a lot of Microsoft IP, it on a few times has actually given me directions I never would have gone to. So that is definitely one of my favorites. Favorite Copilot coming up is definitely going to be in the productivity space inside of Word, generating content, being able to have automate, being able to have Copilot answer emails for me or provide context, because it's going to save so much time. Microsoft did a study which they did at and they announced the results at Ignite. We have a blog coming out soon on the Fusion 5 website. I would highly recommend looking at it, where they did a study with the companies that have adopted Copilot, so the early adopters, and they were on typically the type of return they're getting in time is up to 70% of time back, and productivity is around about 6% increase. My favorite stat from that is they asked the people that they interviewed, these 12,000 users, and said, if you had a choice of a free lunch or having Copilot as part of your day-to-day business, what would you choose? 70% of them said they'd rather have Copilot than a free lunch. So that gives you a very good idea. There's a question on what are the costs for nonprofits. I'm not sure if there's a specific cost for nonprofits. The Copilot licensing has been released as they come out. I'd check with your, if you're typing nonprofit, check with your Microsoft rep, or if not, just drop us an email. Our details are as part of the emails, and we're happy to go and find out. We have phenomenal licensed people in our business that can find that out for you.
For sure, and there are certain incentives from both Microsoft and Fusion 5 for NFPs, but yeah, as Troy said, just reach out directly there. But I do want to say thank you all for joining us today, and I really hope you got some value out of the session, and a lot of Troy's passion for this really shines through, so thank you as well, Troy. As he mentioned there, we do have a Copilot readiness assessment. I'll share a recording of today's session as well as a link to where you can find a little bit more information on that. But we do review some of your key areas such as your data security, regulatory compliance, data quality, data governance, change management, and your business strategy. So it's really well worth it. We give a good 360-degree view of everything Copilot ready. So other than that, I do want to say thank you for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a safe holidays, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thanks for attending, guys. Cheers.
Good. Bye.